Okay, now we are going to discuss about the public policy. Give the assessment of process of public formulation and discuss the problem of policy implementation. So here, what are the formulation and implementation? Okay, so a policy decision involve action by some official person or body to approve, modify or reject a preferred policy alternative. If positive, it takes such form as an enactment of legislation or the issuance an executive order. Policy formulation is a complex process. So demands for policy action has the generated in the environment and transmitted to the political system. At the same time, environment place limits and constraints upon what can be done by the policy maker. So differences in public policy and policy making in various countries can be explained at least partly in turn political culture and variation. Social welfare programs are older and more widely covered in West European countries than in USA because there has been greater public demands and approval of such program in this country. A political culture oriented more to the past than to future, and sanctity of age old tradition, custom and social moves in the idea or more than perhaps. So a country whose culture may be more future oriented, adaptable, innovative. Next, citizen participation in the policy formulation is culture is going to be essentially not exist, and government will be a little concerned and may believe that he can do little to influence public policy, which may lead to his passive acceptance of governmental action rather authorization. So in this culture, chance of popular unrest culminating in the violence very high. In the participant political culture, individual may organize into group and otherwise seek to influence government action on citizen. Further, public policy can seen emanating from conflict between different group, private and public, often with opposing interest and attitude. One of the major sources of conflict in modern society is economic activity. That it was that in many capitalistic country, organization labor dissatisfied with the wage resulting in formation of union bargaining with employee have often sought minimum wage. The implementation of public policies process discovering what work and where work, and the implementation should not be taken in routine activity. It is only when policy becomes operational, some of its travel aspects become routinized. During the implementation phase, the policy organization is always concerned with finding out how best the goal of policy could be achieved. So, government efforts at administration implementing policy pose staggering problem of resolving conflicts, soliciting or cooperation. Many and diverse agency implementation collides with each other or discover overlapping. So further, the problem may arise like limited competence on behalf of administration, inadequate administration resources. This factor determine diversity, fluidity, complexity of implementation of environment and facilitate hamper the smooth implementation. So next is implementing a public policy is process of discovering what work and what does not. Any public policy comprises two major parts like policy formulation and policy implementation. Okay, the implementation of let the gain a prominent place in matter of public policy. The importance of the study of comparative public administration is well accepted today, and there are two factors that made comparative study significant. The first factor led to the academic study of public administration. It is believed that the comparative public administration hypothesis generalization model and theory can be constructed which administration is not considered. Scientific study of public administration, the old orthodoxy of principal administration structure and behavior emerging out the comparative study in different nation and culture can help formulating theoretical constraints which can provide scientific basis study of public administration. The implementation of any public policy so comprise latter half of the policy process still is very crucial for significant functioning of public matter. In fact, the success of any policy depends upon how well the policy is being implemented. The implementation itself depends upon a number of factors: the allocated resources, the amount of flexibility, implementation of any policy, the quality available manpower, skill, the process of monitoring, review, policy implementation. Moreover, the control supervision, which is also responsible for coordination. So more the judgment of available resources, technique, mode of implementation become very crucial, and effective in implementing what it's not. So implementation is very crucial for the success of public policy. Next is laxity. Laxity in the monitoring and evaluation can render even the best policy infructuous. So the monitoring and evaluation of the policy is an important framing policy. Whenever a laxity in monitoring evaluation policy, it can paralyze the policy implementation. Laxity means not working properly. Okay. So there are number of problem in policy implementation. Policy implementation concern or execution of policy has been brought to a new field of implementation study. Woodrow Wilson aptly commented, it is getting harder to run a constitution than frame one. So we can't run the constitution, but we can frame a constitution. Okay, running is the implementation aspect of the government activity. So there are two ways of judging implementation. First is efficiency standards and responsiveness standard. Efficiency standards mean what aspects are produced for given level of input and in which time period. And the responsive is like reflect the accountability, popular will to accept the implementation. In actual administration, there is always a trade-off between the efficiency and responsiveness. Before judging implementation objectivity, a fair assessment of the problem is implementation is essential. So problem in the policy is like policy statement. The policy statements not clearly worded and generally legal terminology are given in policies without proper explanation. So, lack of foresightness, policy implementation, supporting services, the policies government generally have lack of support from staff instrument structure, shortage of time. At the same time, the policy are gigantic and unrealistic. So, pressure on implementation, political pressure is major hurdle of implementation. Vested interest, non-cooperation of citizen and hurdles. Inclination of the implementation. The implementation is lack of will, initiative and term spirit is also a hurdle. In government policy implementation, there is lack of motivation and major hurdle. Generally, laxity is implementation is monitoring the policy paralysis, the policy implementation. So next question is Yechkal draw. Very important question this is. Okay, Yechkal draw. Yech, Kale and roar. Yechkal roar model of public policy is to be academic in perspective with poor operational utility. It's academic. Yechkal roar of normative model. What model he given? It's given the normative model. Normative model is the policy tool for making the systematic analyzing public policy making as a basis for the criteria standard needed to evaluate the public policy and guide for formulating effective proposal for any improvement that found to be desirable. So it's like what are the function? Pure rationality model, economic rational model, sequential decision model, incremental change model, and satisfying model, and extra rational model. So pure rational, extra rational, economic rational, sequential decision, incremental change model, and satisfying model. So these some models are given by Yechkal Broad. This normative model were having many limitations, and Broad suggested an optimal model, optional model. Sorry, he given the optional model, integration and supplementing the strength of various model at the same time avoiding any weakness. However, the attempt of draw at the giving optional model for integrating various model tends to be academic in perspective with poor operational utility. Draw as one hand attached a purely academic approach but gave his argument which were equally academic. Without having any operational utility, Draw gave more importance to the end, concentrated his discussion more on policy paralysis rather than improving societal direction. So he failed to establish any valid correction between the improvement in public policy making in societal direction. So Draw major contribution is meta policy. What Draw wanted it was the meta policy making from his goes over to simply describing the existing structure but failed to underpin the problem of spatial research into deliberate structure change. So, moreover, his discussion on policy science is conditioned mostly by the experience of Western society Israel, but it can't be considered to be complete without adequate examination of experience of third world country and societal words. Although the analysis of Broad suffer from certain shortcomings, the whole approach is of immense academic relevance in a scholar of social science. So next one is even if policy are as well as organized efficiently, operated widely, utilized adequately, financed and supported. We may still ask, so what do they work? What about their cost, output and impact? So policy is some kind of major guideline. Policy has long term perspective where decision has short term perspective. So many decisions combined together makes a policy, and therefore decision is a moment in a policy. A policy decision is also applied in order to examine the public policy. Public policy deal not merely with what the government is doing and how it is doing. So outlay, output and outcome are the three basis constituent of public policy, and a successful program must adhere to outlay and output ultimately in the term of outcome. These three elements can't be seen in isolation. So public policy across constitute of three major steps. One is policy formulation, second is what are the problem, third is the alternatives provided to them for the development, and fourth is for the evaluation and alternatives. So with the help of various means of communication about the formulation of policy transmitted to the public at a large, specific to the affected group for whom the policy have formulated, it become more important in case of the welfare. So policy interpretation to formulate the policy is subject to detailed analysis and interpretation so as to making it more appropriate and sake of policy implementation. Policy implementation refer to the detailed and systematic execution of public policy. The successful implementation of policy depends upon various factors, that is, the policy should be classified into various manageable units. It requires timely availability of resources and term and technology, financial as well as the human resource. There must be appropriate sanction authority so as to avoid delay in completion of project. The successful completion depends upon the various other group and required cooperation under group of segments, and there has to be appropriate administration agency for timely and successful implementation. So policy monitoring. Policy monitoring it implies keeping a check on the program of implementation of policy. Therefore, it is the integral process of policy implementation. Policy evaluation implies the examination of final impact. Policy monitoring provides the basis for the policy evaluation. Its nature should be both quantitative as well as qualitative. The proper feedback system should be developed in order to achieve the successful objective of policy, and it should be incorporated the subsequent policy formulation. Policy are major instrument carefully formulated to move society towards a set of goal. So Government of India has made several policy for the socio-economic development. Narega is the one of them. This is one of the populist program which has got wider social acceptance right from the beginning. The program attempted has been continuously trying to change the fate of rural India. To ensure the efficient and effective implementation of program, outlay, output, outcome, a special process has been mentioned for social audit. So the social audit refer to the in-depth scrutiny analysis offered by the government in terms of their social relevancy. Therefore, the purpose of social audit is to assess the performance of the service, term of social environment, community goal, objective of the government organization. And social audit not concerned with finding at faults in the functioning of the individual functionary. Social audit provides a means to measure the extent to which an organization lies up to the shared value and objective. So social audit has become the important mainly because of the demands of more public accountability and responsibility. Cost is the important factor of program policy. Largest sum of money spent by the government on every development program in order to get the desired result. Output must correspond to the cost, but alone can't measure the success of program. There are number of cases irregularity and misuse of fund. So find allocation of program is also matter of political discuss debate. Hence it needs to be understand that fund allocation and expenditure does not decide the actual output of program. Output of program must correspond to the input of program, that is say under the scheme of Narega. So under the scheme of Narega, there are various provisions such as 100-day job guarantee, 33% women job for unskilled worker, empowerment of people to examine whether it is household got 100 jobs or not, and there is the provision of social audit. Social audit can be done the any member of Gram Sabha. Social audit empowered the common people. This prevent the misuse of fund irregularity. Social audit establish interrelationship between the cost and output. It is the impact of program which transform the society, empower people, raise the living standard. Impact is actual output program, that is say outcome. So it is impact of Narega which has changed the life of rural, and it has increased the purchasing power of rural people, and it's most important the major impact could be seen in the term of worldwide recession. India is not if affected as other country like Japan, and due to global recession, it is the impact of Narega which kept the ball of economy rolling. It is a social audit which relates outlay which output ultimately with outcome. So the success of social audits to great extent depends upon the knowledge about the techniques to be applied and the sequential nature. So social audit should take into consideration more quantitative as a qualitative information from the respondent, and the social audit should be able to suggest modality for the improvement of the performance of the feedback from the respondent. A culture or climate of social audit becomes imperative for its successful application, and therefore it requires a generation of public awareness role of significance of social audits toward the advantage which can be derived by the public at large. Now next is public administration can be portrayed as a wheel of relationship focused on the formulation and implementation of public policy. So all the nation irrespective of the system governance required some form of administrative machinery for shaping and implementing public policy. Public administration has been an instrument of ancient empire of monarchy, of both democracy and dictatorship, and both developed and developing nation. With emergence of administrative state, public administration has become all-encompassing and affects the lives of the people. And from the womb to tomb, it's playing a dual role as administrative organ implementing the policy and as source of fact and experience helping the policy making. So with the changing of society, policy making implementation become a continuous process, and administration work does not end up by implementing a policy. They have to take feedback of policy and make necessary change and re-implement them. With the change in public policy, science administration is not only confined to mere administrating the policy but to the re-administering the also. Hence, it is the continuous wheel relationship of formulation, implementation, and review. Next is cost benefits. Cost benefit is a very unsatisfactory view of evaluating the public policy. So public policy evaluation is a process in which the assessment of impact of public policy is done. The public policy evaluation gives information about the success or failure of public policy. It also provides the response for its failure. This can help rectifying and bringing better public policy. There are various methods of public policy like cost benefit analysis, cost and benefit analysis, and evaluating the method. In this, policy is evaluating for outcome. This is done for whether the policy has been successful achieving the goals, and the main problem in the form of evaluation is qualitative aspect of goal. So it is qualitative aspect of goal. The goal which are to be measured are not measurable. There are no yardstick available to measure the goal. The time span is also problem. Many program implemented and the result will be available after long duration of time. In this evaluation process, the policy is evaluated within the short duration of time. Here the evaluation process is not able to measure the precise impact of program. In the cost benefit analysis, we measure the output. Money spent is resulted in the physical output or not, but we do not require effectiveness of implementation of process. The method of data collection and statistical method used in the policy evaluation are not adequately sufficient. There is no single criteria for the evaluation, and there is no anonymity of the criteria and the theories. So the policy evaluation is not based on single method. It should be based on various methods. Their policy evaluation will give adequate information regarding the policy success or failure. Next is policy is being the met as it is being administrator arid administration as it is being met comment. An organization devises the process and method to attain its aim and objective of called policy in government arena. It is called the government policy. It is arduous task to make policy and much more difficult come in the implementation of such policy. But the policy making and implementation are both closely related to each other. NEC policy background of earlier policy which guide to make new policy effective and efficient. This is also indicate to about why the earlier program was failed. This is universal that public policy affects society. So it is necessary to include those aspects which bring positive effects, and at the same time amendment increase the decrease policy making affects the policy. So it is said that policy is being made as it is being administered as it is being made. So next is the incremental paradigm. Incrementalist. The incrementalist paradigm posits a conservative tendency in public policy. And next is draw optimal model is fusion of economically rational model and extra rational model. So first is incrementalist paradigm posits conservative tendency in public policy. So public policy is complex. As we know, public policy is complex. In a vital activity, diverse perception has to be kept while devising the formulating the policy. Incremental paradigm is the one among them. According to this paradigm, public policy are just extension over adding new feature, and in this difference are not drastic, just omission and commission has been done. This implies future policy would contain little bit of amendment or modification. So this change could lead positive and the negative directions. This paradigm is based on concept of Simon rationality, bounded rationality, policymaker not always to decide or explore the alternative available. Consequently, current policy and the program remain as basis to increase or decrease the demand. But this paradigm does not allow fundamental change in the policy making. This can prevent or mitigate people anger for short term, but it is conservative policy which can't bring any fundamental change. Next is draw. Draw optimal model has three major stage: meta policy making, and post policy making, and within those there are 18 sub stage, one of which is continuous communication and feedback channel interconnection all phase. Meta policy making involves 7 stage of processing value, processing reality, problems, resources, policy making system, allocation of problem, values and resources, and finally determine the policy making strategy. So policy making involve another 7 stage of sub allocating resources, making the prioritizing the goal, ditto for the significant value, preparing a set of major alternative policies, predicting the benefits cost of those policies, identify the best policy, and then deciding whether the best alternative are good policy. Post policy making involve motivating execution of policy. Execution is evaluating the results. In other words, road does not subscribe to the monolithic hierarchy. Never that less the emphasize the needs of overall system management, meta policy making, and comprehensive public policy making in order to promote take advantage of new knowledge and to prevent sub-optimization by single unit. So this was the whole about the drawer and